One of the things you will constantly hear a lot of the left anti-Labour people will say is that Labour isn't for public ownership of things anymore, or that they're not going to even try and attempt any of these things. Well, just this week, we have had, I think, two of the best examples of Labour actually taking something that was in private ownership and bringing it back into public ownership. The first one, of course, is bringing back all the bus franchises of Greater Manchester back under public ownership. It's now called, I think, the B Network. I think they're calling it, with Andy Burnham. He's bringing that back in up in Greater Manchester. That is going to be a very, very good thing for the people of Greater Manchester. And bear in mind, you are seeing all the other local Labour, I don't want to stress this, Labour regional mayors do this as well. Like, they are rolling that out as a thing that they are setting out to do. The West Yorkshire, under doing a consultation, doing sort of the groundwork for going towards that. Simca, the Sheffield City region, also doing that as well. Also, we'll begin talking about in a bit taking Super Tram back into public control as well. We're talking about that in a bit as well. But you are seeing this, and then you might go, "Oh, but what about the Tory areas?" Because the Tories have two regional mayors as well. They've got the Birmingham sort of region, Birmingham region. They're not doing anything about that. Ben Houchen couldn't care less about taking, the bus networks of Teesside back under public ownership. He doesn't really care because, well, he's staked his entire re-election on getting the Tees works up. Needless to say, that hasn't worked out exactly well. But this is something that we are seeing. And I think this is something we should celebrate because, once again, it proves a lot of those people who were saying, oh, Labour are just, red Tories, completely wrong, because no Tory would take something like Sheffield Super Tram back under public control. And bear in mind, I don't like Oliver Coppard, our South Yorkshire regional mayor. I think he comes across sometimes as a bit of a champagne socialist. But overall, a lot of the stuff that he has been doing has actually been quite good. Like I say, but that's politics. You don't agree with someone 100% of the time. But once again, we're going to be talking about Super Tram and why taking it back under public control is going to be so good, and why you're seeing a lot of criticisms of why Barnsley and Doncaster have invested in Super Tram, because you're seeing, especially in Barnsley and Doncaster, people really complaining about that. But we'll get into why they really shouldn't be complaining about that in a moment. But as always, before we do get into that, please do remember to click on the Patreon page down below. There's the Buy Me a Coffee link. There's the YouTube thank you button. And of course, there's the Pony Club as well. You can join all the links down below in the doobly-doo. That you can go help support the channel. You can also just click the like, the share button, and of course, if you're new to the channel, click the subscribe button. And of course, you can leave a comment down below as well. That helps out with all the algorithmical, etc. stuff going on in the background. So I just want to go over this announcement because it's well worth going over. But before we do go into that, I think it's worth reminding people. No, in fact, we'll leave. No, we'll go over this announcement first, then we'll go into because this doesn't mention the controversy that at least the Conservatives and Reform candidates are trying to whip up about this. But we'll go into that in a moment. But we'll get into this first. So this comes from the BBC with South Yorkshire Super Tram back in public control. So South Yorkshire Super Tram has now come back under public control after 27 years of being run privately. The network operates over 4 different routes covering 21 miles across Sheffield, with a tram train extension connecting to Rotherham. Super Tram has been run by Stagecoach since 1997, but the South Yorkshire Mayor said it was now back in public hands as the contract came to an end. Today is a historic day for South Yorkshire, Oliver Coppard said. Since opening in 1994, the network has slowly grown to connect the Sheffield city centre with Meadowhall, Gleedless, Herdings Park, Halfway and Hillsborough. For the first few years, the 100 and 240 million pound scheme was seen as a failure, with commuters opting to use the cheaper, more regular buses instead. But 30 years on, Coppard has said this was just the first step in our journey back to public transport system that puts people connecting our people first and connecting our communities. There are now plans to even create a bigger and better tram networks with new stops at Magna in Rotherham, as well as talks about extending to Stocksbridge, Barrow Hill, Chesterfield, and Derbyshire, with an eye on connecting to hospitals. Again, that is going to be great. And the annoying thing is, this was the plan to begin with. Remember what this network is called. It is South Yorkshire Super Tram. There was plans to have this tram network just weave out from Sheffield all over South Yorkshire. And initially, like I say, he was right. In the first few years it operated, people viewed this as a massive failure because there was a big campaign to get this tram system seen as a failure by heavily the conservatives in sort of South Yorkshire, heavily sort of pushing that this was a completely useless project, a waste of money, wasn't going to work. Oh, we should have spent it all on buses after all. Everyone's taking the buses, right? People love Supertram now, and we'll get into that change in a bit, but it's well worth going over. Um, so back to it. So commuters have been told not to expect big changes straight away as the South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority, or SIMCA, takes over. However, there are now plans in the short term to deep clean all the trams and stops in the next 100 days, with refurbishments of the trams by 2027 and a new fleet by 2032, subject to government funding. The service has now been running at a loss, leading to a lack of investment and a poor experience for passengers, Simca said. South Yorkshire Super Tram is ours again, but we are inheriting the South Yorkshire Super Tram that simply had not been invested in, and it has needed for far too long, Mr. Coppard said. So today we want to start to turn that around. It will not be quick or easy, but my commitment is to create a South Yorkshire Super Tram network that gets the support and care it needs to deliver for South Yorkshire. That is the message that is being taken forward. And that is why you have seen Barnsley and Doncaster invest in Supertram, because their original idea of the Supertram, why it is called South Yorkshire Supertram, was that it was a network that was going to start in Sheffield and expand from there. Now, that did not happen. Why did that not happen? Well, what initially happened when it was started to be built, the Supertram, because obviously you're building it in quite a busy city centre. If you go and you use Sheffield Supertram, you can see the routes that this thing takes. Very disruptive when it was being built. So this did not win Supertram any friends when it was being built. You can go back in like the local archives and you can see all kinds of stuff being written about how disruptive the building of the Supertram is, about how people regret, opting and wanting to build this. And obviously, like I said, the initial plan was to, span out. What ended up happening was the network that we have now, like the existing network, is but barely, it's not even half of what we wanted. Yet you can now go to Rotherham, but that's tram trains, or at least the tram can go sort of onto the train line and use that as a route. Originally, there was a plan for the tram to go straight to Rotherham and even then have another bit of the tram network that would then go into Doncaster, and then that network would then expand through Doncaster. Same for Barnsley as well. Now, that did not happen because of the very successful lobbying campaign that the anti-Supertram people ran. Even when the initial network opened, they started running stories about how the tram tracks were causing more accidents in Sheffield city centre. And they were running these stories quite regularly, trying to sort of emphasize any bad thing that happened. If a tram broke down, they made sure that it was, headline news in the local newspapers, like for the next couple of weeks, how bad it was. Um, but the reality is, people love Super Tram. I love Super Tram. I've really only started taking the tram since the end of the pandemic. Um, like I say, a lot of the people that I would sort of traditionally go and see used to have sort of offices in the city centre. Now they've sort of moved out of the city centre because of the pandemic. I'm having to take the tram more, and I'm loving it. I'm loving taking the tram. It's great. Um, but I would love to see this network expanded upon again and creating those interconnected systems. Just because you have a tram network does not mean that you ignore buses. And bear in mind, the plan for Simca is eventually to bring the bus network, once those contracts run out, again back into sort of public ownership. So once you have that, you can then have this interconnected system of public transport that we just do not have, because you've had two separate or even all these sort of different companies operating, being in competition with each other, not really focusing on the customer experience, making sure that they are sort of serving those communities. So honestly, I think this is going to be a very, very uh, big change, not only just for Greater Manchester, but Sheffield as well. And I again would hope to see another expansion of the Super Tram network, not only just in Sheffield, but to finally fulfill that promise of what started at the beginning, for it to be South Yorkshire Super Tram, to have those services go towards Doncaster, for the network to be able to reach out to there, to be able to sort of again reach out to those to in Barnsley, and then even have Barnsley interconnected to have all the different areas out and around us. And again, you can still have trains and buses as well, but this is just an extra option. And again, you can then say, well, actually, if there's a super tram service there, then people maybe don't need a bus there, but that bus then gets freed up to go on a different route so that it now can serve somewhere else. It's all that interconnection of thinking about that has been missing for the longest time when it comes to public transport. And I mentioned this last night on Labour Social. I really do hope people do focus on just how important public transport can be, and change people's lives for the better. So I think this is very much a sign of good things to come. But make no mistake, the anti Supertram movement is firing back up, heavily criticizing Barnes and Doncaster for investing in Supertram, when they're like, well, actually, no. If we invest in Supertram, then we can get the network up here. But yeah, you know, it's the same old tactics they used in the 90s to vastly reduce the scope of the original plans for Supertram, and we are still paying for that to this day. So we'll see what happens, and we'll keep you up informed what continues on here. But this is a very, very good move forward for public transport in general, and of course, it proves once again that this whole idea of Labour won't take anything back to public ownership. Well, this Greater Manchester, but there you go. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.